Mercy was never a law among wolves, only a choice, and choices were easiest when power had nothing to lose. Packs called themselves families, kingdoms, sacred lines of duty beneath moon and oath stone, yet one rumor could strip a woman down to a body carrying disputed blood. One fear could turn witnesses into cowards. One lie could become custom by dawn. Valentina Stormborn had learned that truth did not survive on virtue alone. It survived if someone carried it far enough, long enough, through fire and winter roads, until it reached a place where even kings had to hear it spoken aloud. She reached the border stones of Windrider territory as dawn thinned the dark, breath tearing at her throat, boots heavy with river mud and ash. The borrowed cloak on her shoulders had once belonged to an old healer from a fairy hamlet 2 valleys east. Rough wool dyed rust brown, now streaked black where sparks had landed and dark where blood had dried. Her own scent had changed in the last week. Warmer, fuller, threaded with the sweet milk note of late pregnancy, impossible to hide from trained hunters for long. Her abdomen ached with the weight of 7 months, one palm curved beneath it out of habit, not fragility. The child kicked once, deliberate, as if answering the staccato alarm in Valentina's pulse. In her other hand she clutched the iron torque she had ripped from her husband's throat after he fell. It was still warm then. It was cold now. 2 Windrider sentries stepped from behind the standing stones, bows raised, wolf-hide cloaks silvered by mist. Both were broad-shouldered, both cautious, and neither lowered a weapon when they took in her face. "Name," the older one said. "Valentina Stormborn, widow of Marius Stormborn of the River Den." Her voice came raw, scraped thin. "I seek sanctuary under border oath. I bring witness testimony against Eric Starfall." The younger guard's nostrils flared. "Starfall has accused your den of espionage." "Starfall murdered my mate for refusing to betray root codes." She held out the torque. "This was his. You can smell him on it. You can smell their hands over mine." The older sentry's expression tightened, not with pity, with calculation. Pack law. Consequence. "You crossed armed territory at first light carrying war grievance." "I crossed carrying proof." His gaze dropped to her belly and then returned to her face. "Any pursuit behind you?" "3 hunters at midnight, 5 by moonset. I lost 2 at the cedar cut. The rest will test your line by midday." That finally moved him. He signaled the younger guard, who vanished downslope toward the interior watch path. "You will be escorted to Great Hall. No promises beyond hearing." "Hearing is enough," she said, though she no longer believed that. By the time they brought her into Corvus Windrider's great hall, rain hammered the slate roof and smoke from pine torches coiled along the rafters like gray silk. The hall was carved from old mountain stone, ringed with antler posts and ancestor blades. Windrider elders sat in a crescent near the hearth, silent and stern, while warriors lined the walls in wet leather, smelling of horse, steel, and storm. At the center stood Corvus Windrider himself, taller than rumor, still as cut granite in a black fur mantle, iron-gray eyes fixed on her with an unreadable restraint that felt colder than open suspicion. He did not greet her. He said, "You claim Starfall crossed treaty line and executed an oath-bound male." "Yes." "On what provocation?" He demanded hidden route codes used by smaller river dens during flood season. My mate refused. Eric ordered his men to burn our den and kill every witness. Murmurs broke along the elder line. Corvus lifted one hand, and the room quieted immediately. "You brought evidence?" She raised the torque. "And memory." Before Corvus could answer, a woman in Starfall colors stumbled forward from the side benches, wrists bandaged, face gaunt. One of Windrider's scouts steadied her as she pointed a shaking finger at Valentina's abdomen. "She lies," the woman said. "I was held in Starfall inner quarters 3 months. I saw her there with a spy from Eric's northern ring." That child is not Stormborn. It is Starfall blood. The words cracked through the hall like a split beam. Valentina did not speak at first. She felt the room tilt around a single axis she recognized too well. Not whether she had survived murder, not whether a king had broken treaty, but whether her body could be called unclean enough to dismiss her testimony. A low thrum built in her chest, part fury, part disbelief. She kept one hand over her belly as if she could shield her daughter from language. Corvus's voice cut across the noise. Silence. The command landed hard, even the hearth pops seemed to withdraw. Yet he remained distant, expression locked, weighing, measuring. Not condemning her, not defending her. A king preserving procedure while her life narrowed to one accusation. In the tight, breathless pocket that followed, her mind dropped inward. I am standing. I am still here. If I break now, they call it guilt. If I shout, they call it hysteria. If I plead, they call it proof I need a man to name me clean. Marius is dead and cannot speak. Eric knew this when he gave the order. He did not need to kill me on the riverbank. He only needed me to arrive alive in another man's hall carrying doubt. That is the trap. Not claws, not fire. Shame as strategy. I can feel my daughter pressing against my ribs, steady as a drumbeat. She has done nothing except exist. I will not let strangers turn her into a legal argument. Breathe. Hold the facts. Hold the names. Do not lose the names. Corvus inclined his head toward the captive witness. You will repeat that statement before Mooncourt if required. The woman swallowed and nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. Valentina heard her own voice from far away. She never saw me in Starfall inner quarters. The captive did not look up. Corvus turned to Valentina. Can you prove your claim? Yes, Valentina said. If your court has the spine for truth. His jaw tightened, slight but visible. Mind your tone in my hall. My mate was executed yesterday, she answered. Tone is what men police when facts threaten them. A few warriors looked away. One elder hissed through his teeth. Corvus's gaze sharpened, and for a heartbeat she thought he would order her removed. Instead he said, You will be housed under guard until inquiry opens. No one approaches her without my sanction, including counsel. He spoke like law, not comfort, and she hated that relief still flooded her knees. The breaking point had started the previous night beside the river, before smoke, before running, when Eric Starfall rode into their clearing with 12 hunters and a smile polished for negotiations. Marius had stepped out first, bareheaded, palms visible, the old torque at his throat catching firelight. Valentina stood in the den doorway, one hand at her back where ache had lived for weeks, the other wrapped around the post that Marius had carved with moon marks when they bound as mates. Eric dismounted slowly, boots crunching frost. I need a map, Marius said. You need permission. I need route codes through the southern marsh and flood channels. You river wolves catalog them. Give them to me, and your den remains under my protection through winter. We are not yours to protect. Eric's smile thinned. Then be practical. I am offering trade, grain for information. You are offering conquest dressed in manners. Eric's eyes slid to Valentina's belly, then back. You have a family to think of. Marius did not move. Exactly. What followed came in swift, deliberate orders. Bind him. Search the den. Take every ledger. When Marius fought the first restraint, 2 hunters pinned his arms, not wildly, efficiently, practiced men obeying hierarchy. Valentina stepped forward, and a hunter blocked her with a spear shaft across her chest, not striking, simply holding her back while Eric walked to Marius and held out his hand. Route codes, Eric said softly. Last chance. Marius spat at his boots. Eric wiped the spit with a cloth and nodded once. Then let this be instructional. She screamed Marius's name when the blade flashed, and the sound seemed to vanish into the roar of sudden fire as hunters kicked open the den door and threw torch oil into the bedding. Flames swallowed the wall hangings first, then the cedar beams, then the cradle Marius had sanded smooth 2 days before. Heat blasted across her face. Smoke bit her eyes. She tried to lunge for him, but 2 men grabbed her arms and held. "Do not mark her," Eric said without looking at her. "I want witnesses to call this lawful." Lawful. The word split something clean in her. She stopped struggling. She went still enough that the hunters loosened their grip, mistaking shock for surrender. She turned her head, memorizing faces in the torchlight. Scar over left brow, split lip, silver bead braided into beard. She counted breaths until one of the men shifted to cough against the smoke. Then she drove her heel down on his instep, slammed her elbow into the other's throat, and ran straight through the burning doorway Eric's men had left unguarded because no one expected a 7-month pregnant widow to choose fire over capture. She went low under the worst of the smoke, cloak over her hair, eyes streaming. Inside the den, she seized the iron torque where it had fallen near Marius's hand and the small waxed packet tucked under the floorstone by the hearth, the one containing root codes Marius had refused to sell. She did not open it. She did not need to. She knew where they were written in cipher and who would kill for them. Behind her, someone shouted, "She is in there." She bolted out the rear hatch toward the river reeds as sparks chased her into the night. Cold water to her thighs, mud sucking at her boots. Reeds slashing wet lines against her wrists. Arrows hissed overhead and vanished into black current. She kept moving, every step chosen, every breath counted, until the burning den became a red smear behind the trees. By first light she had crossed 2 ridges, a logging track, and the old quarry road. By dawn, she stood in another Alpha's hall with ash in her hair and a lie aimed at her child. Valentina closed her hand around the torque until iron bit skin and understood with perfect clarity that refuge would not save them. Only proof would. Only proof would, and proof required breath, footing, and a body that did not fail in public. Valentina forced her fingers to loosen from the torque and realized she had cut her own palm on its edge. A thin line of red crossed the heel of her hand, bright against soot-streaked skin. She tucked the iron collar against her chest before anyone could offer to store it for inquiry, because storage meant distance, and distance meant disappearance. Across the hall, rain struck high windows in hard silver sheets, and the draft carrying in from the courtyard tasted of wet stone and pine sap. Windrider warriors watched her with a disciplined stillness that felt less like welcome than inventory. Corvus stepped down from the central dais, boots silent on old flagstone. Up close, he looked even less humanly composed than from a distance, not because of cruelty, but because every movement seemed calculated against force, as if violence sat just beneath his skin, and he spent each breath deciding where not to place it. A pale scar ran from the hinge of his jaw into the collar of his tunic. Gold thread marked rank at his shoulders, but there were no rings on his hands, no adornment beyond a black iron signet. When he held out his palm, he did not touch her. "The torque," he said, "for witness record. You may keep hold while it is inspected." Not take, inspect. A narrow concession to dignity, and she hated that she noticed. She placed the iron in his hand without releasing it fully. For one taut heartbeat, their fingers bracketed the same cold metal, her knuckles raw, his skin warm despite the mountain chill. His gaze dropped to the blood on her palm, then rose to meet her eyes with a focus so direct it felt like being steadied against a ledge. "You are bleeding," he said, "from evidence." His mouth tightened by a fraction, and he nodded once to a gray-haired woman near the hearth. "Healer Tamsin, clean and seal it. No sedatives unless she asks." Tamsin approached with linen and a copper bowl, face lined by years and weather. She moved with the respectful briskness of someone accustomed to frightened wolves snapping when cornered. "Sit, daughter." "I stand better than I sit," Valentina said. "That is stubborn, not strength." "It is both." A warrior near the side wall almost smiled before catching himself. Tamsin muttered something about mountain-bred fools and cleaned the cut anyway, while Valentina remained upright. By the time the cloth was tied, thunder rolled across the ridgeline, low and heavy, and the hall torches trembled in their brackets. The storm had arrived in full. Corvus returned the torque, this time placing it carefully into her bandaged hand. "You will be lodged in the inner keep under guard rotation I choose myself. You do not leave without escort. You are not to be questioned without me or my appointed law speaker present." One elder rose partway from his bench, outrage roughening his voice. "Alpha, this is indulgence. If the claim is false and she carries starfall seed, housing her in the inner keep invites succession dispute." Corvus did not turn toward him. "Then your concern should be truth, not convenience. She may contaminate rank lines." The word made Valentina's teeth lock. Corvus finally looked at the elder, and the room temperature seemed to drop. "If you use that word for mother or child in this hall again, you will address me from outside these doors." The elder sat, not chastened, contained. Two guards moved to flank Valentina. One woman, one man, both in wolf-hide rain capes damp at the hem. As they guided her toward the side passage, the hall's noise resumed in careful, murmuring currents, half legal argument, half scent-driven suspicion. She kept her chin level and her pace measured. Every few steps, pain tightened low in her abdomen, a pulling ache she had felt before in smaller waves. Stress, she told herself. Too little sleep, too much running. Not now. I am not collapsing in front of men who call me contamination. I am not. Keep walking. Left foot, right foot. Breathe. My daughter is strong. She has crossed ridges with me and river ice and smoke. This is strain, nothing more. If I fold, they say the body tells truth, and the truth they want is weakness. I will not give them theater. I will not give Eric the ending he bought with fire. Hold the wall if I need it. Bite the inside of my cheek if I have to. Keep moving. Keep moving. The passage out of the hall narrowed into a vaulted corridor where torchlight painted amber bars across slick stone. Wind hissed through arrow slits. Somewhere above, chains struck a flag mast in the gusts, metallic and irregular. By the time they reached the second turn, the ache had sharpened into a band of pressure that wrapped from spine to belly, rising fast and ruthless. Valentina stopped with one hand against the wall, breath caught high in her chest. The female guard glanced back. "Need water?" Valentina shook her head, unable to answer through clenched teeth. The pain crested, held, then eased enough for air. She straightened too quickly, and black flecks crowded the edges of her vision. From behind them, Corvus's voice cut through the corridor. "What happened?" "She paused, my alpha," the guard said. "Possibly exhaustion. Possibly." As if language could soften what her body already knew. Another surge hit before she could step again. Her knees buckled. Stone tilted. The corridor torchlight blurred into streaks, and then a hard, warm force caught her before her shoulder struck the floor. Corvus had crossed the distance faster than sight allowed. One arm braced her back, the other spread instinctively over the lower curve of her abdomen, broad hand spanning heat, pain, and the frantic flutter beneath. Contact detonated through her like a struck wire. Not pain, not relief. A bright, crackling pull that raced from skin to marrow and back again, as if two separate currents had found each other and refused to let go. Valentina gasped, fingers locking into the fur trim at his wrist. The corridor vanished to breath, heartbeat, and the impossible clarity of him. Pine smoke, rain, iron. And under it, a note she had never scented before, and somehow recognized. Winter sunlight on stone, clean and dangerous and achingly familiar. Corvus froze. His inhale came sharp, almost a flinch. She watched the iron gray of his irises flood with molten amber, then brighten again until liquid gold burned at their center, luminous in the storm-dark corridor. The change was not theatrical. It was involuntary, ancient, terrifying. The male guard swore softly under his breath. Tamsin, hurrying in from the hall, stopped so abruptly her copper bowl rang against the wall. For one suspended instant, nobody moved. Then the animal part of Valentina went rigid, not in threat, in recognition so deep it felt older than language. Grief reared immediately behind it, fierce and wild. Marius's laugh by the riverbank, Marius's hands shaping cedar for a cradle. Marius dying with firelight on his throat. Her mind tried to split in two directions at once, one toward the dead she loved, one toward the living male holding her as if he had been waiting at the edge of every mile she ran. No, she whispered, though she did not know which truth she was denying. Corvus's jaw flexed, the gold in his gaze flickered once, then steadied. When he spoke, her name sounded unlike any name she had heard before, less a question than a vow caught mid-breath. Valentina. Heat surged again through the contact at her belly. The child kicked hard under his palm, decisive, as if answering him. His expression changed with brutal speed. Shock, anger, refusal, then a control so absolute it looked like pain. He removed his hand first, as if testing whether distance would break whatever had ignited. The current snapped thin but did not disappear. It stayed as a taut line somewhere behind her ribs. He took one step back. For a single breath, she thought he would retreat fully. King before man, law before instinct. Instead, he stripped his heavy black cloak from his shoulders and wrapped it around her, careful of her stomach, careful of the bandaged hand still clutching the torque. The fur lining trapped his warmth immediately. Rain thudded harder against the outer walls. Thunder cracked above the keep. "Get the birthing chamber ready," he ordered, voice clipped and steady. "Hot water, clean linen, moonwort tea. Send for midwife Nera now." Tamsin blinked. "Labor this early can stall." "It can," he said. "It can also kill if we are unprepared." Another contraction bent Valentina forward despite herself. Corvus did not seize her. He extended his forearm and waited. "May I?" he asked. The question hit harder than command would have. In a world where men had pinned, dragged, judged, and traded her body as leverage, consent sounded almost indecently tender. She nodded once. "Do not let them take her from me." His answer came without hesitation. "No one touches your daughter without your word." He guided her through the corridor as the guards cleared the path, his pace matched to her broken breaths, never pulling when she slowed. At each bend, Windrider wolves flattened to the walls and bowed their heads, not in ceremony, in startled deference to what they had seen in his eyes. The keep's interior shifted from war-hewn stone to older architecture carved with crescent motifs and protective runes worn smooth by generations of passing hands. Lamps burned lower here, gentler light over woven rush mats and cedar doors, reinforced with bronze bands. By the time they reached the birthing chamber threshold, rain had turned to a steady roar over the roof tiles, and the storm wind carried the mountain's cold deep into the bones of the keep. Corvus halted outside the door as if crossing that line required a choice separate from law, separate from instinct, separate from the gold that still rimmed his irises when he looked at her. Their gazes locked again, the corridor noise receding to nothing. She felt fear, yes, and anger, and the raw, bewildering pull of a bond she had never invited. But threaded through it was one non-negotiable fact. When his hand had covered her belly, her daughter had gone still for the first time in hours, listening. Inside the chamber, the midwife called for towels and more firewood. Outside, thunder rolled along the mountain spine like distant drums. Corvus held the door for her, and when she stepped over the threshold, he followed. The birthing chamber held heat like a cupped flame, thick with steam from iron kettles and the bittersweet scent of moonwort crushed under Nera's mortar. Cedar logs snapped in the hearth, throwing orange light over old wall carvings of wolves circling a crescent moon. Valentina barely registered any of it once the next contraction took her. Pain tightened low and hard, then climbed her spine until breath came in fractured pulls. Tamsin tried to guide her toward the bed, but Valentina locked her knees, shaking her head, clutching the edge of Corvus's cloak around her shoulders, as if the weight could keep her anchored inside her own body. Nera's voice stayed brisk, calm, unsentimental. 7 months can mean warning labor, not birth. We do this in steps. Lean forward when it rises, breathe down when it eases. Corvus stood 1 pace away, hands open at his sides, watching Valentina rather than the midwife, as if taking instruction from her face alone. Tell me what you need. The question hit her harder than the pain. Need had always been a dangerous word, a lever others used to extract obedience. Another wave bent her, and this time her boots slipped on the rush mat. Corvus moved, stopped short enough not to crowd her, then offered his forearm again. May I hold your weight? She nodded through clenched teeth. He braced her without pulling her closer than necessary, his body a steady wall she could choose to lean into or away from. When the contraction passed, he released immediately. Nera checked pulse, belly, timing, then swore under her breath. They are too regular to ignore. Tamsin, more linens. Leora, keep the water hot. Alpha, if you stay useful. Corvus dipped his head once. Tell me how. Her hands are cold and she is burning through strength. Warm them. Keep her focus between waves. Count with her. He crossed to the low stool beside the bed and sat, not towering, not commanding. Valentina, he said quietly, will you give me your hands? She stared at him for a long breath. If he wanted power, this was the easiest path in the world. A vulnerable body, a closed room, a bond she did not understand. He could have named her publicly as his mate by dawn, and wrapped law around her before she could stand. Instead, he waited in complete stillness, palm up, no pressure in his expression beyond concern he was trying not to show. She put her hands in his. His skin was hot with wolf heat. He turned her wrists gently, pressing her fingers over the pulse point at his throat, then at the inside of his wrist, giving her rhythm to follow. Stay with this, he murmured. In for 4, out for 6. I will count the rise and release. You do not have to do it alone. I do not trust this. I do not trust fate. I do not trust a bond that arrives with thunder after my husband dies in fire. I do not trust the part of me that quiets when he speaks. But his hands are steady and he asks every time. He asks. No one asked when Eric's men held my arms. No one asked when elders turned my body into evidence. My daughter needs oxygen, calm, a mother who does not drown in panic. I can borrow his steadiness without surrendering myself. I can take what helps and keep the rest locked behind my teeth. Breathe in 4, out 6. Count with him. Survive this hour, then the next. Truth can wait until dawn. Survival cannot. The storm pounded the keep for hours. Contractions came hard, then stalled, then came again, each one carving through her resolve and leaving her trembling. Corvus never touched her without warning. Shoulder? Lower back? Water? Each time she answered yes or no, and each answer held. When panic clawed up her throat during a sharper surge, he spoke in that low, precise cadence that made numbers feel like rope across a ravine. 32 seconds. You are already through half. Breathe. 40. Good. 50. Last 10, Valentina. Stay with me. At one point, Nera ordered him aside for an examination. He moved instantly, eyes forward, giving her complete privacy though urgency etched every line of his face. Tamsin glanced between them and muttered, not unkindly. For two people tied this tight by scent, you are behaving like diplomats negotiating a border treaty. Even Valentina gave a breathless, incredulous laugh that turned into a groan at the next wave. Corvus's mouth curved for the briefest moment. Then we should survive the night. Diplomats are stubborn. Near midnight, the pattern changed. Nera's entire posture sharpened. No more stalling. Child is coming now. Valentina, on the bed. Alpha, behind her shoulders. Do not interfere, unless I say. Pain became a world with no edges, only pressure and fire and the fierce instinct to bear down when told, to hold when commanded, to keep listening through terror. Corvus stayed behind her, one arm bracing her upper back when she asked, his other hand hovering near her elbow but never closing unless she reached first. She reached often by then, not because she trusted fate, but because she trusted this moment and this man inside it. When her daughter finally cried, thin and furious and undeniably alive, the sound split the room open. Valentina sobbed once, hard, then collapsed back against pillows slick with sweat, hair plastered to her temples, every muscle shaking with aftershock. Nera wrapped the infant and checked her quickly. Small but strong lungs. She chose drama for her entrance. Like her mother, Tamsin said dryly. Valentina held out her arms at once. Nera placed the bundle against her chest. Warmth, weight, a tiny searching mouth. Tears blurred the world until all she could see was dark, damp hair and a wrinkled brow that looked, absurdly, offended by existence. Corvus had stepped away to give space. He did not reach for the child. He lowered himself to the floor beside the bed, back against the carved cedar frame, gaze dropped in deliberate deference. After a moment, he looked at the infant, not Valentina, and spoke softly enough that only those closest heard. You arrived in a storm and argued with it until it yielded. You are wanted here. No one will erase you. Valentina turned her head toward him, startled by the ache that rose in her throat. He still had not touched the child, though something fierce and tender moved in his expression each time the baby made a small, restless sound. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, voice hoarse. His answer came after a quiet beat. "Because power without restraint is just a prettier name for cruelty." He met her gaze then, gold still faint at the edges of his irises in the firelight. "And because I have seen what happens when an alpha treats bond as ownership. I swore I would never repeat it." Nera finished her checks and straightened. Mother and daughter need sleep. Alpha, out. Valentina expected him to argue. He rose immediately. At the door, he paused. "Do you want guards inside or outside?" "Outside," she said. "No one enters unless I ask. Not even elders." "Done." He inclined his head, not as king to subject, but as one survivor recognizing another. "Rest, Valentina." By the second evening after the storm, the rain had cleared into hard autumn cold, and smoke from the keep chimneys rose in clean vertical lines against a pale sky. The naming fire was held in the inner court instead of the great hall, supposedly for warmth and quieter prayer. In truth, Valentina suspected Corvus had chosen a smaller ring to limit grandstanding from council males, who preferred their politics theatrical. Torches burned in iron sconces around the stone circle. Pack members stood in layered cloaks, their breath silvering the dusk. Valentina carried her daughter wrapped in dark wool and fox fur, the infant sleeping against her heartbeat. Corvus stood at her right shoulder, close enough to intervene, far enough not to crowd. Nera and Tamsin flanked the left, practical as gateposts. Law Speaker Ivan began the right, palms over the flame bowl. Under Moon Witness and Pack Witness, this child receives name, shelter, and record. Valentina opened her mouth to speak the name she and Marius had once murmured by the river, and an elder's whisper sliced across the ring, too loud to be accidental. A widow carrying disputed legacy should not stand in succession fire. Exile her to sanctuary lands and avoid civil fracture. Another elder answered in a hiss of agreement. At minimum, remove the child from rank register until paternity adjudication. The old fear hit first, cold and immediate, then anger, bright and clean. Valentina squared her shoulders, ready to answer, but Corvus moved before she had to. He stepped in front of her and the infant in a single fluid shift that blocked every line of approach. His cloak fell back from his throat and forearms, exposing rank marks that began at his collarbone and ran in dark, jagged lines down to his wrists. As his control thinned, those marks lit from within, amber radiance tracing old scars. His fangs dropped. The predator in him surfaced without a full change, and the pressure of his alpha command rolled outward through the court like a breaking wave. "Say it again," he said, voice low enough to force the whole ring into silence. "Say exile to mother or pup while I stand here." The first elder tried to hold his ground. "My alpha, we speak for stability. A ruler compromised by private attachment invites challenge." Corvus took one step forward. "This is not private. Hear me under pack law." He turned just enough that the entire court could see both his face and Valentina behind him. "Any threat, insult, or procedural maneuver aimed at Valentina Stormborn or her daughter will be treated as a direct challenge to my authority and to Windrider protection statutes. Effective now." Murmurs rippled. He did not let them build. Elders Bran and Olek, for prejudging a protected witness and inciting succession panic during naming right. You are stripped of council voice for one moon cycle. You will attend sessions, you will listen, and you will speak only when called by law speaker. Defy this and you lose your benches entirely. Bran's face flushed dark. You cannot silence counsel for caution. I can, and I just did. Corvus's gaze hardened. Caution weighs evidence. Cowardice weaponizes rumor. Ivan swallowed, then lifted his staff. Order recognized. Sanction entered into record. The ring settled, wolves lowering their eyes as the hierarchy reset around a new center of gravity. Corvus stepped back to Valentina's side only when the silence held. He did not touch her until she shifted the infant and gave the smallest nod. Then he placed one hand at the middle of her back. Light, steady, exactly where support was needed and nowhere else. Valentina felt the difference in her bones. Not protection whispered in private rooms. Not heat in a corridor and promises made under storm. This was policy spoken into law, witnessed by those who had tried to reduce her to a dispute. He had bound his crown to her safety in front of everyone who mattered. She looked at the gathered pack, at Nera's approving scowl, at Tamsin's narrowed eyes daring anyone to object, at the elders now rigid with thwarted outrage. Then she lifted her daughter higher so the firelight touched the child's face. "Her name is Mara," she said, voice carrying clear to the outer stones. "Mara Stormborn, daughter of Marius, daughter of my blood, protected under Windrider oath." A few heartbeats passed. Then Ivan struck the staff once against stone. "Recorded." Corvus repeated it, stronger, letting the name ring through the court. "Mara Stormborn, protected." The pack answered with a low, unified howl, not triumphant, not wild, but solemn, an acceptance note laid into the night. When the rite ended and wolves began to disperse, Valentina turned to Corvus. Words felt insufficient beside what he had done, yet she offered the one that mattered most in her world. "Thank you." His expression gentled. some of the hard command easing from his mouth. You do not owe me gratitude for enforcing law. Maybe not. She shifted Mara against her shoulder and, after a brief hesitation, rested her free hand over the pulse at his wrist where he had steadied her through labor. But I owe you truth. I saw what you did tonight. He held very still under her touch, as if startled by it. And what did you see? Not a king guarding a scandal, she said. A man choosing who he is in front of everyone watching. For the first time since she crossed his border stones, Valentina let a piece of her guard drop without fear of what might rush in to fill the space. Corvus did not seize it. He simply stood beside her in the cold autumn dark, hand warm at her back, while their daughter slept between them and the naming fire burned clean. The last ember cracked in the naming fire, and a runner in a rain-dark cloak pushed through the dispersing ring with a leather tube clutched to his chest, and panic sharpened into discipline across his face. He went to one knee before Corvus, then glanced once at Valentina, as if recalibrating which truths could no longer be kept in separate rooms. From the East Grain Road, my Alpha, intercepted from a dead courier before dawn. Seal is starfall wax, but the root mark is guild neutral. Corvus took the tube. How dead? Throat cut clean. No insignia left on him. Valentina felt Corvus's hand leave the small of her back as he broke the seal with his thumb. He read in silence, shoulders tightening by degrees, then handed the parchment to Ivan. Read it aloud. Ivan's mouth thinned as his gaze moved down the page. To healer circles of the Treaty Valleys, verify under oath that Valentina Stormborn bore witness to conception by unnamed northern male in Starfall service. Use phrase mixed blood instability when petitioning Mooncourt record. Payment on delivery of sworn statement. He looked up, voice roughening. There are 6 signatures beneath. None are Eric's, all from his war council. A hush moved through the courtyard, ugly and immediate. Valentina held Mara closer, the infant stirring once, then settling against her collarbone. Corvus extended his hand toward the runner again. All of it. The man produced a second packet, wrapped in oilcloth. Inside lay 2 scent cloths and a strip of bark ledger with trademarks burned into it. Even from where she stood, Valentina caught the adulterated reek. Her own cedar and smoke note rubbed into fabric with a male scent that did not belong to Marius and never had. Deliberate contamination. Crafted evidence. Eric had not wagered on claws alone. He had built a machine. Corvus turned to Valentina, no command in his face, only grim clarity. Come to the map room. Mara, too. Nothing about this goes through council first. Nera stepped close as they moved. I will keep the child warm while you read. Valentina shook her head. She stays with me. Corvus answered for both of them. Then she stays with us. The map room sat behind the old armory, round-walled and windowless, lit by 3 suspended lamps that made the vellum charts glow like pale skin. Pins marked river routes, winter stores, oath roads, and minor den holdings from both territories. Valentina stood with Mara at her breast while Corvus laid out the forged cloths with iron tongs, as if evidence itself carried infection. Ivan read the letter again, slower this time, and Tamsin checked the ledger strip against known healer ciphers. This payment code is real, she said. Not guild approved, but real. He is using caravan brokers as cutouts. Which means deniable testimony, Ivan said. By treaty season, neutral packs hear 6 healers say mixed blood, and your enemies never need to prove anything else. Valentina stared at the cloth bearing her scent and felt the precision of Eric's mind like a cold blade against the spine. He had watched men fail to kill her and simply changed methods. If he could not erase her body, he would dissolve her credibility until law did his work for him. I am so tired of being processed by men who call strategy what it is. He burned my home and still wanted procedure. Now he buys witnesses and still calls it adjudication. If I stay quiet, he writes my daughter into rumor until rumor becomes precedent. If I fight loudly, they say grief has made me unstable. I can feel the old urge to disappear, to keep my head down, survive privately, raise Mara somewhere no council knows her name. But private survival is how predators win inheritance. I am done surviving in corners. I will not hand him my silence and call it safety. Corvus was watching her, not intrusively, but with the unbroken attention he gave only battlefield maps and labor pains. Say what you are thinking. That he is not improvising, she said. He is sequencing. First my reputation, then yours. Then alliance fracture before winter treaties. Ivan nodded reluctantly. The prevailing route, yes. If neighboring packs think Windrider Alpha accepted disputed lineage for personal bond, they can challenge your rulings as compromised. And when grain raids start, Valentina added, he leaves no insignia. You strike the wrong border and look tyrannical. Silence followed, brief and heavy, because she had just named the next move before scouts confirmed it. Corvus's jaw flexed. We treat this as active campaign, not scandal containment. He gave orders with clipped precision. 2 couriers to neutral pack scribes with copies of the bribe letter. 1 rider to the Healer Guild master at Hollow Ford, demanding authentication of signatures. Sent trial request logged in advance with Mooncourt registrar. Fortified escorts on grain routes with paired trackers. Every instruction was repeated back, recorded and assigned. No theater, just architecture. By the second morning after the naming fire, Frost filmed the inner fountain and the first reply returned from Hollow Ford, stamped in blue wax and written in a meticulous hand. The guildmaster denied authorizing any testimony and named 3 healers on the letter as suspended for oath violations 6 months earlier. That should have been vindication. Instead, it proved reach. Eric had access to disgraced healers with enough technical legitimacy to confuse distant courts, and confusion was all he needed. Windrider kitchens tightened flour rationing, patrol rotations doubled. In the Great Hall, conversations ceased when Valentina entered and resumed in lower registers when she passed. Pressure accumulated in layers too thin to call panic, too constant to ignore. Corvus began spending his late hours in the sanctuary wing under the pretext of security review. He checked latches, window bars, and guard logs himself, then ended up seated on the floor near Mara's cradle while Valentina sorted statements for Ivan. He would ask before crossing any threshold, before lifting a blanket, before taking the child when she fussed. Always permission first, always restraint where other men offered entitlement. One night Mara would not settle, tiny fists rigid with newborn outrage. Valentina had walked the room twice, then 3 times, her scarred lower back singing with fatigue. Corvus stood by the hearth, uncertain in a way that would have been almost funny if she had possessed spare energy for humor. She dislikes me, he said quietly. She dislikes being a person with lungs and expectations, Valentina muttered. It is not personal. His mouth shifted, the beginning of a reluctant smile. A fair assessment. She handed him the child anyway. He froze like a soldier receiving unstable ordnance, then adjusted with painstaking care, one broad palm supporting Mara's spine, the other cupping her feet to keep warmth in. He did not coo. He did not bounce. He simply breathed slower and let her match him. Within minutes, the crying thinned to damp hiccups, then sleep. Valentina watched the line of tension ease from his shoulders and hated how tenderness could feel like a trap when it was precisely what she had needed for weeks. He looked up, amber threaded through the gray of his irises in the firelight, predator and guardian coexisting without apology. You should sleep. And leave you holding all my leverage? I would die before using her that way. I know. The answer came too quickly, too honest. The resulting quiet was not awkward, only charged by truths neither of them had language to place safely. She turned back to the table, pretending to review witness names while her pulse climbed for reasons that had nothing to do with threat assessments. 3 days passed before the East Road Patrol limped back through the gate with 2 wagons burned to their axles and 1 survivor half frozen beneath a tarp. The surviving driver, a broad woman named Syrah, smelled of soot, fear, and wolf adrenaline gone sour. She reported masked attackers who moved in trained formation, disabled lead horses, took grain, and vanished into cedar fog without banners. "No markings," she said, shaking as Tamsin stitched her arm. "But one gave a hand signal I saw at Starfall levee drills last winter." Corvus did not slam his fist or snarl for dramatic effect. He listened, asked sequence questions, and dispatched trackers before her bandage was tied. But when he rose, the room seemed to brace with him. "They are forcing attribution without proof." Even rubbed both hands over his face. "If we retaliate on suspicion, we hand him exactly what he wants." Valentina stepped closer to the map table. "Then we document every raid pattern and publish them to treaty packs before he frames the narrative." Corvus looked at her with brief, fierce approval. "Do it." By dusk, another courier arrived, this one in formal black with a Moon Court token pinned to his collar. He requested entry under adjudication privilege, which meant refusal could be cited as obstruction before arbitration opened. Corvus received him in the great hall with full witness benches present. The envoy unrolled a vellum writ and spoke in ceremonial cadence. "By ancient law of blood adjudication, Alpha Eric Starfall petitions paternity rights over minor female known as Mara Stormborn, alleging unlawful suppression of lineage inquiry by Windrider Authority. Said child is to be surrendered to neutral custody pending scent determination at Starfall Fortress under Moon Court supervision." The hall erupted. Corvus's command dropped over it like stone. Quiet. Valentina did not feel shock this time. She felt recognition. Eric's objective stood naked in the center of the room. Drag the hearing onto his ground, frame surrender as legal duty, and force Corvus to choose between appearing weak or igniting open war. Ivan took the writ, scanning the seals with visible nausea. "The registrar stamp is genuine," he filed through proper channels. "Proper channels bought with forged witnesses," Tamsin snapped. "Still proper in procedure," Ivan said. "If we reject jurisdiction outright, neutral packs may side with Starfall on technical grounds." Corvus's gaze never left the envoy. "Tell your Alpha this petition is contested and venue challenged. The mother appears with counsel at Moon Court, not in his fortress, and not without reciprocal charges entered for murder and fabrication." The envoy inclined his head, expression flat. "I carry one addendum, my Alpha." He produced a smaller folded note and passed it to Corvus alone. Valentina watched his face as he read. First stillness, then a hardening so complete it resembled armor being welded shut. "What is it?" she asked. Corvus handed her the note. One line in Eric's hand she recognized from river trade permits. "If she does not appear within 9 nights, I release the root codes you still think hidden and let winter finish what fire began." Her stomach dropped. The waxed packet she had taken from under the floor stone was still hidden in Windrider Vault, untouched. But Eric was betting no one else knew that. He was weaponizing the belief that she carried strategic map knowledge and threatening mass casualties among small flood dens if proceedings delayed. Real danger. Not rumor now. Logistics, winter exposure, leverage across entire river communities. Corvus spoke before she could. "Double guard on the vault. Move the code packet to the Sanctum archive with 3-key access." Ivan blanched. "If Council hears that move, panic spikes." "Then Council hears it from me, with context." The first snow of the season began that night, dry and wind-driven, rattling against high shutters like thrown grit. Valentina stood at the sanctuary window with Mara sleeping against her shoulder, and the writ spread on the table beside the iron torque, the forged cloths, and Eric's note laid out as a single chain of intent. Evidence everywhere, and still the path narrowed toward a ring of stone where truth would have to survive spectacle. A soft knock sounded at the sanctuary door. "Valentina," Corvus called through the wood, "may I come in?" "Yes." He entered and stopped at respectful distance. "I can hide you," he said, voice low. "There are valley sanctuaries no court can trace quickly." She kept her eyes on the dark ridgeline. "And confirm every rumor that I cannot stand under law. It keeps you alive. It keeps us hunted." He did not answer because both statements were true and neither was enough. A horn blew from the outer gate, urgent, then again. Boots pounded in the corridor. Nera pushed through the door without waiting for permission, breath clouding in the cold draft. "Southwatch reports Starfall Outriders massing near the treaty stones," she said. "Not crossing yet. Just close enough to be seen." Valentina looked at the writ, then at her sleeping daughter, and felt decision settle with the weight of iron in her palm. 9 nights, a court he intended to rig. Raids already underway, outriders on the border. The crisis had moved from accusation to countdown. Corvus did not look at the window again. He looked at Valentina, then at Mara, asleep against her shoulder, and whatever argument he had prepared died before it reached his mouth. "Gate horn pattern was border assembly," he said to Nera. "Not breach." He turned, already issuing orders into the corridor. Ivan to the war room, Tamsin to sanctuary records. Double escort on every stair between this wing and the outer court. No one touches mother or child unless Valentina agrees. Nera nodded and vanished back into the hall. Snow hissed against the shutters, a dry scrape like bone over stone. Valentina set Mara in the warmed cradle and tucked the blanket to the infant's chin, fingers lingering one heartbeat longer than necessary. The forged cloths, the writ, the letter, Eric's note, and the iron torque lay across the table like pieces of one trap. Corvus came back to her with a wolf pelt mantle over one arm. "Wear this," he said. "You are planning to keep me inside." "I am planning to keep you breathing." She met his eyes. "If I disappear tonight, he wins without stepping over the line." A hard knock struck the doorframe. Ivan entered, breath fogging in the cold, moon court token raised in his hand. "Herald from the registrar at the treaty stones. Emergency convening under moon law to prevent armed escalation. Both alphas required immediately. Petitioner requests maternal appearance for preliminary standing." Petitioner. Not even a name. Corvus swore under his breath. He forced venue before dawn. Ivan's gaze moved between them. If Valentina does not appear, Eric argues suppression. If she appears without formal witness protection, he argues coercion either way. We can contest both later, but tonight, he is building first impression for every neutral pack runner. The room narrowed to the sound of Mara's small breathing and the wind battering the keep. "I am done being moved like cargo between men who call it procedure. I know what hiding buys. One night of safety and a season of rumor. I know what appearing costs. Fear in my throat. Old grief ripping open. Every eye searching my body for weakness they can rename as guilt. I am tired, still healing, stitched to a child who needs warmth and milk, and a world that will not make her prove she deserves to exist. But this is the crux. If I do not stand now, I teach them she can be negotiated away. If I stand, I may shake, I may bleed, I may fail, yet the facts will be spoken in my own voice. I choose my voice." She lifted the iron torque and slipped it over her wrist like a vow. "I am coming." Corvus's jaw tightened. "Then you stand inside my guard radius and you do not step past my shoulder." "No." Her answer came low and steady. "I stand where the law can see me." not hidden behind you, beside you. For one long second, command and respect fought across his face. Respect won. He draped the pelt around her shoulders and tied it himself, careful not to brush the markless skin of her throat. Beside, he said, then we do this properly. An hour later, the treaty stones blazed with torchlight under a sky full of blown snow. Neutral banners ringed the ancient circle, and the Moon Court registrar stood at the oath stone in layered gray, 2 scribes at her back, 5 marshals with crescent badges keeping the lanes clear. Windrider wolves held one arc of the ring. Starfall outriders held the other, armored dark with frost. Eric Starfall waited at their center in black leather and silver clasps, posture loose, smile polished for an audience. Valentina stopped when she saw him. The same measured hands, the same eyes that had watched fire take her home. Eric spread his arms as if greeting an old ally. Widow Stormborn, you look well for someone supposedly hunted. Corvus moved half a step, but Valentina's fingers touched his wrist and he held. The registrar struck her staff on stone. Proceedings open. Petition concerns paternity contest, venue challenge, and claims of fabricated witness evidence. All parties speak in turn. Eric bowed with theatrical precision. My concern is stability. A child of uncertain lineage cannot be inserted into succession under a compromised alpha's private attachment. A ripple of disquiet moved through the neutral ranks. Valentina stepped forward before Corvus could answer. Then let us discuss certainty. The registrar inclined her head. State your role. Valentina Stormborn, widow under treaty, mother of Mara Stormborn, witness to murder under border law. She raised the torque. I submit physical evidence and sworn account. Eric's smile thinned. Dramatic props do not alter blood. She ignored him and handed the torque to a marshal, who passed it to the registrar's table. Iron collar removed from my husband Marius after execution at Riverside Den. Scent still intact beneath smoke. I request it logged for murder charge, not paternity theater. Corvus signaled, and Ivan advanced with sealed packets. Additional submissions. Intercepted bribe letter to traveling healers, forged scent cloths carrying adulterated markers, guild response from Hollow Ford identifying suspended healers named in the scheme, and petitioner's direct threat regarding route codes. Scribes bent over parchment at once, ink scratching hard in the wind. Eric laughed softly. Convenient papers from your own keep. Fabrication is easy when one controls scribes. Valentina unwrapped the final oilskin bundle herself and lifted the waxed code packet she had taken from the den floor stone. This is what he killed for. Her voice carried clean across the ring. Flood route ciphers for small river dens, unopened, unused. I kept it sealed because those roads keep families alive in winter. He threatened to release these codes if I did not appear tonight, not to protect blood. To blackmail populations. Even the Starfall line shifted at that. The registrar examined the intact wax and nodded to her scent marshal. Seal, unbroken, entered. Eric's composure flickered. You expect this court to trust a grieving female's memory over an alpha petition? Valentina took one more step into the circle, boots grinding frost. I expect this court to follow its own law. I invoke widows' challenge rights and request scent trial by touch on submitted cloths and blood relation markers. Ivan inhaled sharply. The registrar's brows rose. You understand failure penalty. If you lie in direct oath contact, the backlash can stop your heart. I understand. Corvus turned toward her, voice almost inaudible beneath the wind. There are safer routes. Safer for whom? His gaze held hers, fierce and pained and proud at once. Then he bowed his head a fraction. For the record, I object on risk. For truth, I stand with her request. The registrar raised her staff. Challenge accepted. The right moved quickly. A bronze brazier was carried to the oath stone, coals fed with moon resin and judge leaf until pale smoke climbed in twisting strands. The forged cloths were suspended over it on iron prongs. Valentina knelt, set her palm against the cold face of the stone, and drew a ritual blade across the same hand already scarred by the torque. Blood welled, bright and immediate. She pressed it to carved runes while the marshal held a true lineage token from Mara's swaddling ribbon near the smoke. Pain bit hard, then spread in icy waves up her arm as the oathstone drank heat from her skin. She kept her hand in place. "Name your witness account," the registrar said. Valentina's breath shook once, then steadied. "Eric Starfall demanded root codes at my den. Marius refused. Eric ordered his hunters to bind him, burn the den, and execute him. I identified hunters by face and mark: scar over left brow, split lower lip, silver bead braid, ash tattoo at right wrist. I escaped with this sealed packet and the torque." He then arranged false testimony on my daughter's blood to destroy standing before treaty season. The smoke above the cloths turned from pale silver to thick black, coiling downward instead of up. Gasps broke along the ring. One of the marshals swore openly. The registrar lifted both hands for silence, eyes fixed on the brazier. Forgery indicated. Strong adulterant response. Eric moved then, breaking hard toward Mara where Nera had stepped close behind Valentina at the ring edge, hand snapping out through the lane. "This rite is tainted." Valentina moved first. She turned, took Mara from Nera in one swift motion, and thrust the infant into Corvus's arms as he closed from her left. Then she pivoted back, seized the ceremonial spear planted beside the court markers, and drove the butt end into Eric's knee with all the force in her hips and grief. Bone did not break, but his leg buckled and he crashed to one hand on the stone, curse tearing from his throat. Corvus passed Mara back to Nera without taking his eyes off Eric and was already there. "Sanction challenge," he barked to the registrar. "Alpha to alpha." "Granted," she answered instantly, inside the ring. Eric shifted partially, claws ripping from his fingertips, amber bleeding into his eyes. Corvus met him head-on, no flourish, just brutal economy. They collided in a spray of frost and torch sparks, two heavy bodies trading strikes that echoed off stone. Eric slashed high. Corvus took it across the shoulder and answered with a body blow that drove air from Eric's lungs. Eric lunged low for the throat. Corvus turned, caught his wrist, and slammed him into the oathstone base hard enough to crack old lichen free. For one pulse of time, the narrative shifted through Corvus like iron through flame. Protect the mother, end the claimant, keep the court inside law so no ally could contest the outcome later. He ignored pain, ignored the hot line of blood under his tunic, and used leverage instead of fury. When Eric overcommitted on the next strike, Corvus dropped weight, hooked his leg, and sent him flat on his back in the center of the ring. He pinned Eric by the throat with his forearm, fangs bared, breath steaming in the cold. Marshals dragged two shackled Starfall hunters forward at Ivan's signal, both captured in the morning sweep near the South Stones. One stared at the ground, the other looked at Eric and went pale. The registrar spoke sharply. "Under oath smoke, state command chain for Riverside incident and false testimony payments." The first hunter swallowed. "Direct from Alpha Eric. Burn den, kill male, leave female alive to discredit." His voice broke. "Bribe healers, spread mixed blood claim." The second nodded, tears freezing on his lashes. "He said she was a tool to break Windrider." Eric spat bloodless saliva toward the stone. "She was." Corvus did not hit him again. He held him down and answered in a voice that carried to the farthest banner. "You mistook a mother for prey and a crown for something stolen by rumor." The registrar lifted the moonblade from its stand and turned in a full circle so every faction could witness. "By unanimous martial and witness assent, Eric Starfall is stripped of alpha rank for murder under false petition, fabrication of testimony, and war provocation under treaty cover. Sentence is immediate execution under Moon Court authority. No one objected. Not one voice. Corvus released Eric and rose. Two marshals took the condemned Alpha to his knees at the stone edge. The blade fell once, clean and final, and the scribes recorded the sentence before the body was removed from the ring. Silence followed, vast and wind-cut. Then the registrar struck her staff. Claims against Mara Stormborn are void. Petition dismissed with prejudice. Valentina Stormborn's widow testimony is affirmed. Submitted evidence is entered into permanent treaty archive. Remaining Starfall Council named in the bribe letter are ordered for arrest and trial. Valentina did not realize she was shaking until Corvus reached her and stopped one hand's breadth away. "May I?" She nodded. He steadied her elbow, nothing more, while she looked across the circle at blackened smoke still curling over the forged cloths, and knew the lie had finally died in public where it had been born. Behind them, Windrider voices rose in a low, united howl that rolled over the stones like dawn breaking through storm. The howl was still rolling across the treaty stones when the registrar raised her staff again and called the court back to order. Wind cut through the circle, carrying resin smoke, iron, and the sharp scent of overturned rank. Valentina stood with Mara in her arms, and Corvus close enough to guard, not close enough to decide for her. "Before we close these proceedings," the registrar said, "all submitted evidence will be dispositioned in witness view." She pointed to the marshal table. "The iron torque of Marius Stormborn is logged under murder adjudication and returned to his widow as kin relic. The forged scent cloths are verified false and will be destroyed after ash samples are sealed for archive. The bribe letter, Healer Guild denial from Hollow Ford, emergency writ, and petitioner's threat note are entered into permanent treaty record." Her gaze shifted to Valentina. "The sealed route packet remains sealed. Its custody transfers to Tri-Key protection under Moon Court, Windrider Law Speaker, and the Mother Witness." Ivan stepped forward and touched his fist to his chest. "Recorded and accepted." Syrah, her stitched arm bound against her ribs, came from the Windrider line to witness the packet transfer. She gave Valentina a grim nod that held no ceremony, only solidarity between women who had survived being useful to violent men. The packet went into an iron coffer with 3 separate locks. One key to the registrar, one to Ivan, one to Valentina. No one could erase it now. No one could quietly replace it either. The captive from Starfall Colors was brought to the stone edge under guard, the same woman who had pointed at Valentina's belly in Corvus's hall. Her shoulders shook, but her voice carried. "I lied under command," she said. "Eric held my younger brothers at Frost Gate and promised to send their heads if I refused." She swallowed hard. "I offer sworn correction and accept sentence." Valentina watched her for a long beat. Old fury rose, then settled into something harder and cleaner. "Your lie nearly killed my daughter. Your truth helped kill the man who ordered it." She looked to the registrar. "Let her correction stand in archive. Let her serve 1 year in healer camps under guild supervision instead of prison. She knows how coercion works. Put that knowledge where it protects someone." The registrar nodded. "So ordered." That could have been the ending. It was not. Corvus crossed to her slowly, stopping within reach and leaving the final step open. His shoulder was bandaged beneath torn black leather where Eric's claws had landed, and frost had melted in dark lines through his hair. He did not lower his head like a king granting favor. He stood like a man asking for truth. "Valentina Stormborn," he said, voice low but carrying to both packs. "Judgment is done. Fear is no longer deciding this moment. Do you choose me freely, with full right to refuse?" The circle went silent again. Even the horses seemed to still. She looked at him and felt the full, multifaceted weight of what choosing meant. Marius did not vanish because another bond had awakened. Grief did not become betrayal because her pulse steadied at Corvus's nearness. Love was not a narrow room with only one door. It was larger, more demanding, and less tidy than the stories elders told pups by winter fire. I loved my dead. I love my living child. I can build something new without denying either truth. I can choose, not surrender. I can claim and be claimed as an equal. Valentina shifted Mara into Nera's waiting arms, then stepped into the center of the ring until she stood chest to chest with Corvus. Tears cooled on her cheeks in the night wind, but her spine stayed unbent. She tipped her chin, baring the junction of neck and shoulder. Yes, she said, I choose you. His breath caught. Mine? She held his gaze. Yours. His hand came up, warm and steady against the back of her neck, giving her one last beat to pull away. She stayed. He bent and set his teeth with controlled reverence where throat met shoulder. Pain flared white, sharp enough to split a cry from her chest, then transformed as the bond opened fully, heat rushing through every nerve, not consuming, aligning, like long fractured pieces finding their exact fit. Gold light raced under her skin in branching lines, mirrored across the rune marks on his arms. The pressure in the circle eased as if a storm front had finally broken and passed. What flowed through the bond was not domination. It was exchange. Her fierce protectiveness, the ache of river loss, the iron vow that had kept her moving through smoke and snow. His restraint. The centuries of command held too tightly, the quiet terror of failing those under his name. Mara's bright new pulse threaded through both of them, small and undeniable. The connection settled into a deep, steady current. He lifted his head, forehead to hers, voice ragged. Mate. She answered against his mouth, barely above a whisper. Mate. Then Valentina took his wrist. The court had expected completion. It had not expected reciprocity. She turned his arm to the pulse point just below the glowing runes, looked up once for consent, and he gave it with a single fierce nod. She bit down, not savage, deliberate, sealing her claim with equal force. His exhale shook through him. The mark lit gold beneath her lips, and the bond surged again, wider now, balanced. Around the ring, restless wolves who had been pacing at the edge of agitation went still, then calm, as if some underlying dissonance had resolved. When she released him, a thin line of blood welled and vanished under light. Corvus's eyes had gone fully amber, something ancient and relieved looking out through them. He drew her into his arms, careful of her healing body, and held her as if he had been braced for impact for years and could finally stand down. Mine, he murmured into her hair. She pressed her palm over his marked wrist. Yours. By sunrise 3 days later, the united packs filled Windrider's high terrace beneath clear autumn sky, banners of both territories braided together along the stone rails. No one had slept much. Everyone had opinions. For once, opinion was required to pass through law. Ivan read the merger compact line by line before witnesses. Starfall families who swore clean oath were absorbed under Windrider protections. Eric's War Council, named in the bribe chain, stood for individual trial rather than collective punishment. Grain routes reopened under mixed patrol command led by Syrah. Healer supervision camps were established under Tamsin and guild auditors, including the corrected Starfall witnesses' sentence. The suspended elders, Bran and Olek, remained voiceless for the full moon cycle, and, on record, submitted formal apology for prejudging mother and child. They spoke the apology themselves, stiff and pale, but audible. Then came the crown. Nera carried Mara to Valentina at the terrace center, the child bundled in silver-lined wool and blinking at the morning light with solemn outrage. Corvus stood at Valentina's shoulder, not on the top step above her. The registrar placed coronation steel across Valentina's brow, engraved with crescent and river mark, and announced her title to every rank in hearing. Valentina Stormborn Windrider, Moon Queen of the United Pax, sovereign over sanctuary law, widow protections, and pup lineage courts. The words struck like bell metal, not decorative, structural. Valentina looked over the gathered wolves and saw, with hard-earned clarity, a paradigm shifted in real time. Law no longer as a weapon pointed downward, but as a framework she could now shape from within. Corvus took her free hand and lifted it, their paired marks visible in the sun. Mara Stormborn Windrider, he said, voice carrying clean to the outer steps. Acknowledged protected heir by blood and bond. The pack knelt. Hundreds of wolves, heads bowed not to terror, but to chosen belonging and witnessed truth. Valentina stood in coronation steel with her daughter on her hip and her mate at her side, wind moving across the terrace and dawn pouring gold over stone, and for the first time since fire took her river home, safety did not feel borrowed. It felt built.